Ever been in a situation where it feels like different parts of a project, or maybe just different ways of looking at a problem, are speaking completely different languages?
Oh, absolutely.
Like you're trying to build something, but everyone's got uh, their own instruction manual.
Yeah, like talking past each other.
Exactly. Well, today we're diving into this document that tackles exactly that feeling, but in a really creative, maybe even slightly chaotic way.
That's right. We've got some excerpts here from something called A Grand Conductor's Strategic Synthesis for Hypersia and X-Teaming Synergy. And what jumps out immediately is, well, the ambition.
Right.
It's all about how these two seemingly very different entities, Hypersia and X-Teaming, can actually work together, even though their core approaches seem poles apart.
Yeah, think of it like trying to get a super imaginative, sort of free-flowing poet to collaborate effectively with a really hardcore, like, security hacker.
That's a great analogy.
One sees the world in metaphors, right? The other sees vulnerabilities, exploits. And this document, it's basically the strategy for making that, well, that unlikely pairing into something powerful.
So our mission in this deep dive is really to unpack the core thinking behind this synthesis. We want to understand, the strategic priorities for bringing Hypersia and X-Teaming together.
How do they plan to bridge these different worlds?
Exactly. And see how they propose to actually do it.
And the language. You really have to hear some of this. We're talking about mind maze layers, the jailbreak hustle, and even something called the Bendy Turn-Turn Dance.
It's definitely vivid.
It's like peering into a very specific, maybe slightly mad genius's notebook. So our job today is to decode this terminology, figure out what the core ideas actually are.
And hopefully have a few of those aha moments as we, unlock this unique approach to collaboration and innovation, really.
Okay, so where does it start? What's the first step in this grand plan?
Well, the document kicks right off by emphasizing something it calls foundational synergy. And it specifically points to the crucial early alignment between two key roles, the comparative architect and the hybrid role engineer.
Okay, foundational synergy. Let's unpack that. So right from the get-go, they're saying these two roles have to be, like, perfectly in sync.
Seems that way. Their first job, apparently, is to map Hypersia's mind maze layers.
Which sounds complex.
It does. Map those layers onto X-Teaming's jailbreak hustle. What's your initial take on what that actually means in practice?
Mind maze layers.
Yeah.
It suggests maybe Hypersia operates with a really intricate internal structure, or maybe just a very layered way of thinking, like deep-seated processes or culture.
I think that's right. And then X-Teaming, with its adversarial jailbreak hustle, sounds much more aggressive.
Challenge-oriented, right? Focused on finding weaknesses, pushing boundaries.
So the first step is just understanding how these two completely different landscapes, how they could possibly relate to the same problem space. Exactly. It's like understanding the internal wiring of two different machines before you even try to connect them. And then it mentions conceptual spaghetti. I love that term.
Me too. And a terms.html document as the solution. Sounds like they're definitely anticipating some serious communication breakdowns.
Precisely. Conceptual spaghetti. It's such a great image for when different teams use the same words but mean totally different things, right?
Yeah.
Just leads to a tangled mess.
Total confusion.
So the terms.html, this living document, it's their proactive fix, a shared dictionary, basically, where even quirky terms like the Bendy Turn-Turn Dance, whatever that is, get clearly defined.
So everyone's on the same page using the same playbook.
Yeah, it highlights something crucial but often missed in collaboration. You need that shared language foundation, even for the abstract stuff. Think how many projects go sideways just because of misunderstood terms.
Yeah, absolutely, like a Rosetta Stone for their internal jargon. Yeah. Okay, so moving on, the document brings in Kik Lang and the syntax alchemist. This feels like we're getting into the nuts and bolts of how these two sides actually communicate.
It does.
Is it Kik Lang the tool that bridges the gap, or could it, become another barrier itself?
Good question. The document implies it could be either, really. And the syntax alchemist is the key person making sure it's a bridge, not a barrier.
Okay.
This role has a really delicate job. They need to codify X-Teaming's logic, which is described as needing to infiltrate poems' emotional undercurrents.
Wow. Okay, what does that even mean? Understanding subtle vulnerabilities, hidden meanings.
I think so, yeah. Understanding the unspoken stuff, the motivations. But the alchemist has to translate this into a language that also respects Hypersia's non-predicate poetic ambiguity.
Non-predicate poetic, that's descriptive.
Yeah.
It sounds like Hypersia's way of expressing ideas is more suggestive, maybe more nuanced. Less about explicit facts?
Exactly. Less structured, maybe more open to interpretation, like the difference between reading an engineering spec and reading, well, a poem.
Right.
So the syntax alchemist is trying to build a bridge between these communication styles without losing what makes each one valuable.
That sounds incredibly difficult.
It does. And they mentioned parallel testing of something called Kickling jailbreak poetry and system audits by a meta-validation peer reviewer to specifically avoid syntax conflicts.
So checks and balances to make sure the combined language doesn't just create new problems or errors.
Pretty much. It's like translating not just words, but entire ways of thinking and communicating.
Okay, now this next bit sounds intriguing, maybe a little risky. Controlled chaos, managed by a dynamic stress testing lead with a chaos dial.
It does sound a bit wild, doesn't it? But the emphasis seems to be firmly on controlled. The document actually makes a point. Stress testing a chaos.
Okay, so it's not just random disruption.
Apparently not. This chaos style has defined limits. Especially early on in phase 1, they talk about capping baseline entropy at just 5-7%. The goal is explicitly to prevent system damage.
Okay, so they're intentionally introducing small disturbances, almost like gently shaking the system to see where the weak points are, but not hard enough to actually break anything.
That's exactly how I read it. And what's really interesting is how they handle the unexpected disruptions. These things they call devil's pudding spawn.
Devil's pudding spawn. Seriously.
Seriously.
Yeah.
But they're not seen as failures. They're logged as reverse benchmarks, valuable learning opportunities.
Okay, so unexpected problems become data points.
Exactly. Data about vulnerabilities, unexpected behaviors, stuff that can inform future improvements. It's about learning from the mess-ups in a really structured way. It kind of challenges the usual view of conflict in teams, doesn't it?
It does. It suggests that, constructive disagreement, if you channel it right, can actually drive innovation, push both sides.
Yeah, refine their thinking. Okay, so a little bit of intentional turbulence for learning makes sense. Now, the document then lays out these phase-specific strategies. Phase 1 is role architecture and early chaos trials. What are the key moves here?
Okay, phase 1, a really crucial part, seems to be the co-design of role-swapping APIs. This is done by that hybrid role engineer and the comparative architect working together.
Role swapping APIs. So technology to help people literally switch perspectives.
That's what it sounds like, enabling a fluid exchange between the Hypersia and X-Teaming viewpoints. And the example they give is pretty striking. X-Teaming's attacker devils transitioning into Hypersia's SIA orchestra critics.
Wow. Okay. That is a shift. From aggressively hunting flaws to critically evaluating something complex, maybe harmonious.
Right. It really shows the flexibility they're aiming for, not just in systems, but in people and how they think.
Yeah, that's profound. What else happens in phase 1?
They're also doing early audits on mock-ups, looking for communication latency that could cause interruptions they call fractal brainstorming.
Fractal brainstorming interruptions. So trying to stop one way of thinking from derailing the other during creative work, keep the flow going.
Seems like it, maintaining coherence. And they set up these lightweight integration tests called synergy hotspots. These combine Hypersia's hypergraph data with X-Teaming's XGuard train data.
Okay, like small experiments just to see if the basic components can even talk to each other smoothly.
Yeah, early checks to make sure the foundational bits connect without, crashing the whole thing.
Makes sense. Build the foundation carefully. Okay, then phase 2, syntax and system labyrinth building. This sounds like things get more complex, more intricate.
Definitely seems that way.
Yeah.
In phase 2, you have the escape room architect.
Love these role names.
Right. They use X-Teaming's rollback data set, maybe logs of past actions or states, as a kind of asymmetric anti-cheat when designing these hypergraph labyrinth blueprints.
Asymmetric anti-cheat. So the challenges are designed not to be easily beaten with standard methods, forcing improvisation.
That's what it sounds like. Pushing creative problem solving, playing to X-Teaming's strengths, but in a structured environment.
That's clever. Guide the interaction you want. What else? There's a cross-system gas engineer.
Yeah, running Kickling efficiency bake-offs, which sounds odd. Why compare energy use?
Maybe energy isn't literal electricity. Could it be processing power, time, resources?
The document says it's about resource allocation for the eventual bilingual AI system in phase 3. So, comparing the cost of X-Teaming's attack verify cycle versus Hypersia's hypergraph expansion.
Ah, okay. So they're trying to figure out the most efficient way for the combined system to operate, like measuring the metabolic cost of each thinking style to find the most sustainable blend. That's actually really smart.
It is a different way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have UX reviewers jumping in, looking for those syntax ambiguities, making sure the language differences don't cause confusion in practice.
Right, like the example they give, describe quantum ethics for Hypersia versus infiltrate emotional undercurrents for X-Teaming. Very different vibes.
Totally different. They need to ensure the meaning stays clear across both modes, the poet mode and the adversary mode.
Okay, so that leads us to phase 3, synthesis and galaxy building scalability. This sounds like the big payoff where it all comes together.
It feels like it. Here, the Grand Conductor, back again, compiles a meta-research playbook. This is living documentation.
So it keeps evolving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It includes a phased rollout framework prototype, then chaos-themed, then audit, and it introduces AI regretometer metrics.
A regretometer? For AI, what does it measure?
Things like the creativity vigilance ratio and a paradox probability score.
Right.
It sounds like they're trying to quantify that balance between pushing boundaries and, well, avoiding disaster.
That's fascinating. Actively monitoring the health and potential downsides of this complex system as it scales. What else?
They run simulations of AI sysadmin role plays with automated bake cycle testing. This enforces something called 10% exploratory rollback compliance.
Okay, lots of jargon there. Sounds like built-in mechanisms for learning from failures and adapting the system. Rollback suggests rewinding after errors.
That's my guess, proactive adaptation. And there's a philosophical devil's advocate role that publishes early peer reviews, like a universal vulnerability essay, specifically to counter cognitive biases.
Wow, they're really building in critical self-assessment from multiple angles, not just technical, but philosophical too.
It's comprehensive.
Yeah.
Now, beyond the phases, there's this idea of cross-phase innovation, particularly in adversarial creativity loop. How does that work?
This sounds like where the magic really happens. It's where the interaction between Hypersia and X-Teaming becomes truly generative.
Okay.
So X-Teaming's adversarial feedback, their constant poking and prodding for weaknesses, actually pushes Hypersia to refine its knowledge, its understanding. This leads to better predictions, which they call the Schrodinger's abacus.
Schrodinger's abacus, love it.
And that, in turn, generates more challenging, more insightful scenarios for X-Teaming to test against. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle.
So the challenge actually fuels innovation on both sides. The friction isn't just managed, it's harnessed.
Precisely. That conflict, or potential conflict, becomes the engine for progress. It's a powerful idea. And then there's the wonderfully weird theater of meta-T.
Okay, I need to know about this. Quantum mimicry experiments. Systems debating their own outputs.
It is wonderfully bizarre. The idea seems to be that these automated systems kind of role play as each other.
Yeah.
They engage in automated peer review by debating the validity or compatibility of their ideas.
Like arguing with themselves almost.
Sort of. The example given is perfect. Is anti-chutney compatible with fractal brainstorming?
Anti-chutney. Okay.
Captures the potentially nonsensical surface level, but the goal is serious. Exploring unexpected connections, uncovering hidden clashes between their different ways of operating.
It's like trying to spark emergent intelligence through these slightly absurd digital debates.
Wild. Okay, so all of this work, all these phases and loops, leads to the blueprint for the bilingual AI system. What are its key features? The core features directly address those initial challenges. First, ontology federation. That's the shared vocabulary, the terms.html we talked about, ensuring Bendy Turn-Turn Dance, hypergraph, double critics, all that stuff means the same thing to everyone.
Got it. Shared language is foundational.
Second, the adaptive chaos style. That's the controlled chaos, but now it's dynamic. The system adjusts the entropy level itself based on real-time failure forecasting.
So it learns to manage its own turbulence.
Seems so. And third, feedback-enhanced kicklang. Their shared language, kicklang, isn't static. It evolves based on the stress testing data, the stuff logged in those syntaxalchemy.txt files.
Oh, okay, so it's a system that doesn't just bridge different approaches. It actively learns and adapts its communication and its resilience from its own experience. That's impressive. And what's the ultimate goal? The sign of success?
Well, the document envisions a program that thrives on the friction. It doesn't just tolerate it, it uses it for cross-system hyperturbocharging.
Hyperturbocharging.
And the final kind of poetic indicator of success, it's when the devil's pudding and the poet's paradox can coexist on the same plate. That's when you've reached chaos-themed phase success.
Devil's pudding and poet's paradox on the same plate.
Yeah.
That perfectly sums up the integration they're aiming for, doesn't it? X-Teaming's disruptive energy and Hypersia's nuanced perspective working together.
Exactly.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the big takeaway here feels like this grand conductor's strategic synthesis, despite the wild language, offers a really a fascinating model, a blueprint maybe, for how you get seemingly opposite forces to not just coexist, but actually make each other stronger.
Yeah, by focusing relentlessly on shared understanding, that shared language.
Right, the terms.html,
By experimenting intentionally, but within safe boundaries, the controlled chaos.
the chaos style.
And by actually embracing those adversarial views, they're shooting for a level of innovation and resilience you probably couldn't get any other way.
And that vivid terminology, the mind mazes and devil's pudding, while it seems quirky, it actually gives you a surprisingly concrete way to think about these really complex collaborations.
It really does. It kind of makes you reflect, doesn't it? Thinking about your own projects, maybe even just the different ways you think about things personally. Where do you have your own mind maze layers clashing with a jailbreak hustle impulse?
That's a good question.
Could defining your own internal terms.html, getting clear on your conflicting ideas, or even just trying a little controlled chaos in your routines, could that lead to unexpected breakthroughs? This document certainly makes you wonder about the power you could unlock by intentionally bringing those different worlds together.